He didn't come to investigate. He didn't come to spy. He just wanted a sandwich. That's what Lucas told himself as he pushed open the door to Carter's diner, the one he built from scratch 15 years ago with nothing but a loan, a dream, and an old griddle that barely worked. The bell above the door chimed a nostalgic tone, one that used to stir pride in his chest. But this time, no one looked up. Not a single glance from the people he paid. Perfect. His disguise was working. Faded jeans, a fraying flannel shirt, and 3 days' worth of stubborn stubble masked the 40-year-old CEO beneath. A battered baseball cap hung low over his eyes. The man who had once known every inch of this kitchen like the back of his hand now entered like a stranger. And yet, something had drawn him back, a whisper in his gut. Customer reviews still glowed with praise, but numbers didn't lie. Profits at this location were dipping, and employees were churning like never before. "Table for one?" the waitress mumbled without looking up from her notepad. "Counters." "Fine," Lucas answered, roughening his voice to sound more like a tired traveler than the man who signed her paycheck. He slid onto a stool at the far end, right where he could see everything. The lunch rush was in full swing, waitstaff darting between booths, line cooks barking over sizzling pans, receipts spitting from the register like clockwork. On the surface, everything hummed, but something felt off. Then he saw him, an elderly man hunched over a dish station, his movements slow but precise, methodical. Lucas remembered hiring dishwashers like that, men who took pride in the job nobody noticed. The man's name tag read Oliver. His back was bent, hands gnarled from years of wear, but there was a quiet nobility in the way he handled each plate. Not rushed, not careless, just steady. Lucas tilted his head toward him. "He been here long?" he asked the young cashier across the counter. Her name tag said Emma. She rolled her eyes. "Forever. Should have retired years ago, if you ask me." Lucas narrowed his eyes, sipping coffee through tightening fingers as he watched Oliver mop up a spilled tray without complaint, water soaking into an apron that had already seen too much of the day. Customers greeted Oliver by name, smiling. He smiled back, soft, warm, like someone who still believed kindness mattered. That's when it happened. A young mother approached the register, 2 children clinging to her side. She opened her wallet, froze, whispered something to Emma. Lucas couldn't hear the words, but he saw the embarrassment on the woman's face. Emma frowned, called over another cashier, "Charlotte," they whispered. Annoyance thick in the air. The kids looked up at their mother, sensing her distress. And then, Oliver moved. Quietly, without a word, he dried his hands, shuffled forward, and slipped a few bills into Emma's palm. Lucas barely exhaled. That single act unraveled everything. The way Charlotte sneered, muttering, "That's the 3rd time this week." The way Emma laughed and said, "Old fool's gonna go broke saving strays." And then came the punch to the chest. "He sleeps." In that junker car out back, you know. Lucas froze. The sandwich hadn't arrived yet, but the truth just had. Lucas watched the diner as a conductor might study an orchestra, attuned not just to the melody, but the dissonance hiding beneath it. Plates clinked, forks scraped against china, order slips flapped like birds caught in a windstorm. Yet his focus never strayed far from Oliver. The old man moved like time had its own respect for him. While the younger staff scrambled in chaotic rhythm, Oliver remained composed, folding into the madness with a quiet grace that drew no applause, but somehow demanded attention. He didn't bark or boast. He didn't drag his feet either. Every plate he rinsed, every glass he stacked felt deliberate, intentional, like even a spoon deserved dignity. Lucas stirred his coffee slowly, the bitterness mirroring something rising in his chest. His order arrived. Turkey club and coffee. Basic. Emma didn't linger as she served it. Lucas barely touched the sandwich. His appetite was gone, replaced by something heavier. Questions. He kept his eyes on Oliver as a busboy tripped and sent a tray of dishes crashing near the dish station. Water splashed, silverware scattered. The young man cursed under his breath and walked off. But Oliver said nothing. He didn't scold, didn't sigh. He just rolled his sleeves higher on arms that had clearly seen decades of wear and got to work cleaning up the mess. Lucas noticed how customers waved to Oliver when they passed the dish window. Some called him by name. A few even stopped to chat for a second. In return, Oliver smiled, always. Not the forced kind worn by people paid to be polite, but something else. Something warmer. Something that couldn't be faked. Then came the woman. Late 20s, maybe. Eyes tired. Shoulders tense. 2 kids in tow, one clinging to her leg, the other spinning a straw in a plastic cup. She approached the register slowly, like someone approaching a toll booth with an empty glove box. Lucas leaned forward as she opened her wallet. Her expression fell. She whispered to Emma, clearly embarrassed. Lucas couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. Her body language said everything. Emma frowned, whether at the woman or the inconvenience, Lucas couldn't tell, and called over Charlotte, who arrived with a frown to match. They huddled, spoke in hushed tones. The mother looked like she wanted to disappear. Her kids picked up on the tension and fell quiet. And then, like before, Oliver moved. He didn't rush, didn't make a show of it. He simply dried his hands, shuffled over, and slipped some folded bills to Emma without making eye contact. The woman exhaled visibly, thanked him over and over. Her kids smiled again. The moment passed, like a brief cloud lifting from a summer sun. "That's the 3rd time this week," Charlotte muttered, not quietly enough. Lucas's jaw tightened. "Old fool's gonna go broke saving strays." Emma snickered. "As if he isn't broke already. He sleeps in that junker car of his. I saw it parked out back yesterday." She wrinkled her nose like the thought offended her. Lucas gripped his coffee mug tighter. The ceramic edge bit into his palm. At that moment, the shift manager walked by. William. Young, stressed, clipboard in hand, clearly on his last nerve with 100 tiny problems. He didn't glance at Oliver. Didn't ask why his dishwasher was handling customer payments or why the cashiers were whispering behind the register. He just kept moving. And in that silence, something snapped into place for Lucas. He wasn't just witnessing a moment of unkindness. He was watching a culture, a rot. One that crept in quietly while no one was paying attention. Over the next hour, Lucas watched more. He saw Oliver return to his station and keep working, even as his hands shook faintly from arthritis. He caught him wincing when no one was looking, rubbing his lower back discreetly as he bent over for another load. And still, he kept moving. At one point, a waitress dropped a tray of plates. Before she could even stoop to collect the mess, Oliver appeared with a mop. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart," he said gently. "Accidents happen." His voice was calm, forgiving. The young woman smiled in relief. But as she turned to return to her table, Charlotte walked by muttering, "Yeah, accidents happen, especially around old men who should be in a nursing home." Lucas waited for someone, anyone, to say something. The waitress heard. She winced, but said nothing, just kept walking. By 5 o'clock, the energy in the diner shifted. Day crew winding down, dinner crew clocking in. The bustle doubled. The noise rose. And still, Oliver didn't stop. He moved to clean the grease traps, a job Lucas knew was usually reserved for the night shift. William passed by again, noticed. "Oliver, go home," he called out over his shoulder. "Night. A crew can handle that." "Just finishing up," Oliver replied, not missing a beat. "Jake C. called in sick again. Don't mind staying a bit." William sighed. Didn't argue. Just walked off. Lucas frowned. It felt practiced. Like this happened often. Like Oliver always stayed late, and no one asked why. Lucas nursed a 3rd cup of coffee, more to stay in place than for the taste. He kept watching. He saw Emma and Charlotte lean in toward each other again, whispering. They kept glancing at Oliver, laughing at something. Every part of their body language screamed calculation, furtive glances, synchronized posture, practiced smirks. Then Emma made a show of opening the cash drawer. "We're short again," she said, loud enough for Lucas to hear from halfway down the counter. "That's the 3rd time this week." Charlotte jumped in like a script she'd rehearsed. Same as last Tuesday, and Thursday it was $35 then. Lucas saw Oliver straighten up slightly from behind the dish station. He caught that flicker in the old man's eyes. Concern, confusion, maybe even fear. And in that moment, Lucas knew what he was watching wasn't just an accusation forming. It was a storm. One aimed at a man who had spent his day helping strangers, quietly covering the flaws of others and asking for nothing in return. Oliver was standing in the eye of it, unaware. But Lucas wasn't. Not anymore. He came in looking for numbers, profit margins, customer flow. What he found was far more valuable and infinitely more disturbing. As he stood to leave, Lucas cast one last glance at Oliver's weathered silhouette against the flickering fluorescent lights. Something in him hardened. He would be back tomorrow. Not as a CEO, not as a customer, but as a witness. And this time, he'd be watching everything. Lucas returned the next day. Same time, same disguise. Worn jeans, plaid flannel shirt, cap pulled low. Just another man grabbing a bite. No one questioned the stubble or the silence. He took his seat at a booth near the counter. Perfect line, of sight to both the register and the dish window. The lunch crowd had thinned, replaced by a quieter rhythm. It was the lull between shifts, the space where secrets feel safe to crawl into daylight. And that's exactly what Lucas was counting on. Oliver was already there. Of course he was, moving a little slower than yesterday, rubbing his wrist when he thought no one was watching. Still, he worked with the same quiet efficiency, bussing, tables that weren't his, wiping counters. Other staff had walked past. Emma and Charlotte were back on shift too. Lucas recognized the way they huddled near the register, their posture too relaxed, their smiles too private. Every now and then their eyes flicked toward Oliver. Each glance chipped away at Lucas's. Patience like water wearing down stone. He ordered coffee and a slice of pie, used a newspaper as cover, though his ears were working harder than his eyes. The words drifted across the counter, soft but clear. "So anyway, I checked," Charlotte said, her tones soaked in smug satisfaction. "That old man's been here 7 years. Can you believe that? 7 years. Washing dishes." She chuckled, shaking her head. "Pathetic." Emma snorted. "What's pathetic is how he keeps bailing out these losers who can't pay their bills, like that single mom yesterday. Come on." "Playing the hero," Charlotte agreed. "With what? His social security pennies?" She leaned closer. "He probably lives off cat food to save money." Lucas's grip tightened around the mug. Every word struck deeper than the last. This wasn't workplace gossip. It was contempt, directed like a weapon at someone who had done nothing but help. "Bet he lives in that rust bucket behind the diner," Emma added, lowering her voice. "Have you seen it?" "That Buick probably sleeps in the back seat," Charlotte snickered. "Nah, my money's on a cardboard box behind the Walmart." Lucas stared at his coffee, the dark liquid trembling slightly from the tension in his hands. He had built this place to be a haven, for customers, for staff. Hearing this rot spew from behind the counter felt like watching mold bloom on something once pure. Emma's voice dropped, just enough to make Lucas lean in. "He's becoming a problem. William's starting to notice the register doesn't balance. Guess who's always hanging around it?" Their voices dipped further, and Lucas strained to catch the next part. "So here's what I'm thinking," Charlotte whispered, checking the diner for ears. "We know he's been slipping money in the till when customers come up short." Emma nodded. "Yeah, but William doesn't know that. He just sees the drawer not adding up." "Exactly," Charlotte smirked. "If we help those numbers not add up a little more and he happens to be nearby." Emma's eyes lit up. "Then he's the only explanation." Lucas froze. The air thinned around him. The pie sat untouched. Coffee. Cold. He wasn't just hearing malice now. He was hearing a plan, a setup, a frame job. And the target was a man who had spent 2 straight days giving when he had nothing to spare. "Tomorrow," Charlotte continued, "William's doing inventory. He'll be extra focused on the numbers." Emma leaned in, practically vibrating with glee. "We'll make sure they don't add up, and make sure Oliver's standing right there when they don't." They bumped fists like a touchdown team, like this was a game. Lucas swallowed hard, trying to keep the bile down. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the kind of deliberate cruelty that festers in corners where no one bothers to look. And somehow it had grown roots inside his own business. A young family entered the diner, momentarily breaking the scene. Lucas watched Charlotte straighten her apron and slip back into her practiced customer service voice. Emma followed, smiling like nothing had happened. But Lucas wasn't fooled. Not anymore. His eyes drifted to Oliver again. The old man hadn't heard a word. He was busy rescuing a jammed coffee filter, humming a low, tuneless melody under his breath. Still serving, still smiling. Lucas couldn't move, couldn't speak. He just sat there, invisible in his own empire, watching vultures circle a man they had no business judging. A man who lived with less pride, yet more principle than either of them could fathom. The hours dragged. Lucas stayed through the end of shift, watching the small human details that made Oliver extraordinary. When a waitress spilled soup on her shoes, Oliver appeared with towels before she asked. When the sink backed up, he didn't complain, just fixed it. When a teenager's card got declined, Lucas saw Oliver's hand move to his wallet again, discreet as always. "Why do you let that kid slide?" Charlotte asked him later, voice sharp, loud enough this time for Lucas to hear. Oliver shrugged. His voice was soft, but firm. "His mother lost her job last month. Boy's too proud to take charity, but I know he's hungry. Sometimes a meal. Makes all the difference." Charlotte rolled her eyes the second he turned his back, mimicking his tone for Emma, who burst out laughing. By closing time, Lucas had seen enough. He paid his bill. Left a generous tip. Walked out with a calm that barely masked the storm inside him, but he didn't drive away. Instead, he parked across the street, engine off, watching from the shadows. Almost an hour passed before the last lights dimmed. Then Oliver emerged, slower now, shoulders sagging under fatigue. He crossed the parking lot and climbed into the rusted Buick. The headlights flickered once, twice, then coughed to life. Lucas followed at a distance, lights off, heart pounding. Oliver didn't go far, just down a cracked service road, behind a line of overgrown trees. There, almost swallowed by the dark, sat a trailer that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 90s. Oliver parked behind it, climbed 3 rickety steps, and pushed through a door that stuck. A single bulb flickered on inside. Lucas watched it glow like a distant star, and something inside him broke. He had built Carter's Diner to be a place of dignity, of family, of opportunity. Somewhere along the way, it had become something else, and he hadn't seen it. Not until now. Not until a man with broken shoes and a bigger heart showed him. Lucas didn't sleep that night. He didn't need to, because tomorrow he'd be back. And this time, he wasn't just watching. He was planning. Lucas didn't go home that night. Not really. His body returned to the apartment. His keys landed in the tray by the door. But his mind, it never left that gravel access road behind the diner. It stayed with the image of a worn-out man disappearing into a structure that barely qualified as shelter, where the light bulb flickered like it was tired of trying. Lucas stood in his own kitchen, the floor polished, fridge humming softly, untouched food behind glass shelves, and all he could see was the hollow space Oliver called home. Sleep didn't come. His conscience wouldn't allow it. By dawn, Lucas was back in motion, coffee black, eyes red, intent sharp. He made a few calls, quiet ones, careful ones. There would be a plan. But first, he needed more than suspicion. He needed truth. He headed to the diner early, again in disguise, but before slipping inside, he turned toward a nearby coffee shop just down the block. Inside, tucked into the corner booth, sat Ron, an older gentleman Lucas remembered seeing at the counter nearly every day, always chatting briefly with Oliver. If anyone knew the old man's story, it would be him. "Thanks for meeting me," Lucas said, still in character, sliding into the booth. Ron studied him carefully. "You're that guy from the other day. Sat near the register. Quiet type." Lucas nodded. "I've been watching Oliver. I need to understand." Ron's expression softened. "A lot of people don't bother trying." Lucas leaned forward. "How long have you known him?" "Almost 6 years," Ron said, voice gravelly but steady. Started coming to the diner right after his wife passed. Martha was her name. High school sweethearts. Married 52 years. Lucas blinked. That long? Ron smiled faintly. You don't hear numbers like that anymore, huh? But they were real. Old school. She got sick out of nowhere. Cancer. Aggressive. Insurance barely touched it. He sold the house, cashed out his retirement, even sold her car. Moved her into the best place he could find, paid for experimental treatments just to get a few more months. Lucas swallowed hard. Did it help? Ron nodded. Gave them 8 more months. He said it was worth every penny, even though it nearly broke him, called it the hardest, most beautiful season of his life. She died with dignity. He made sure of that. Lucas gripped the edge of the table. And afterward, Ron stirred his coffee slowly. Bills kept coming. Oliver refused to declare bankruptcy. Said a debt was a debt. Said he'd pay it, even if it took the rest of his life. Diner was the only place that would hire him. 60 years old, arthritis, no restaurant experience. But he showed up anyway. Never missed a shift. Still sends checks to the hospital every month, too. Lucas stared at the man across from him, as if seeing Oliver through Ron's eyes made everything feel even heavier. Does he have family? Ron nodded. Daughter in Seattle, Sarah. She wants him to move in with her, but he won't. Says he won't be a burden. Too proud. Too damn noble for his own good, if you ask me. Lucas rubbed his temple. He lives in that trailer still? Ron's eyes dropped. Yeah. Can't afford much else. Pays hospital first, always. Trailer park he's in. It's being sold to a developer. 60 days notice. Don't think he's told anyone yet. Lucas leaned back, silent. That gut punch he'd felt the night before returned with full force. Him sharp and relentless. He had built Carter's Diner on the belief that hard work deserved more than just a paycheck, that this place would be different. But somewhere along the expansion talks, investor meetings, and franchise logistics, he had lost sight of his own compass. Oliver had been right there all along, embodying the very values Lucas used to preach in corporate meetings and startup pitches. Humility, service, honor. And he'd let that man live like this. When Ron left the booth, Lucas stayed behind for a while, staring into his coffee like it held answers. Then he returned to the diner, not as a CEO, but as something else, someone owning his failure. He slipped into the same booth as yesterday, heart heavy, gaze locked on the dish pit. There was Oliver again, like clockwork. Hands moving, shoulders tight, a wince tucked behind every movement, but still he smiled. When a young waitress dropped a glass tray, he was there in seconds, shielding her from William's irritation with a calm, "Don't worry, sweetheart." When the coffee machine backed up, it was Oliver who stayed late to fix it, tools in hand, like it was his home kitchen. And when that same teenage boy came in and his card declined again, Oliver was there, folding a few bills into Emma's hand without a word, without expectation. Charlotte saw it too. "Why do you keep doing that?" she asked him later, annoyance barely concealed. "That kid's not your problem." Oliver shrugged, never looking up from his task. "His mum's been out of work. Boy's too proud to ask for help. Sometimes a meal makes all the difference." Charlotte rolled her eyes the second his back turned. "St. Oliver, patron of the pity party," she whispered to Emma, who giggled like it was a punchline. Lucas felt his hands curl into fists beneath the table. This wasn't just neglect, it was rot, and he'd let it fester. That trailer, those long hours, that aching body, that was the cost of blind growth. And it had a name. Oliver. Lucas stood up slowly, left cash for the meal he barely touched, and walked out. But he didn't go far. He circled behind the diner in his car, turned down the same dirt road as the night before, and waited. At 8:52 p.m., the lights in the diner finally dimmed. Minutes later, the Buick pulled out from the back lot. Lucas followed again, lights off, heart hammering. The car crept along the edge of town before veering behind a cluster of industrial buildings. There, barely visible from the main road, sat the trailer again, sagging porch, flickering light. Silence. Oliver parked, climbed the stairs, shouldered the stuck door open, and vanished inside. Lucas stayed parked for 10 minutes, then 20, then 30, trying to process what he'd seen, trying not to weep, because this wasn't just a story of poverty or pride. It was a story of betrayal, of a man who gave everything, while the people around him gave nothing back. And tomorrow, Lucas decided, that would start to change. Lucas woke before dawn with one thought echoing through his mind. If truth wouldn't rise on its own, he'd drag it into the light himself. He had seen enough, heard enough, felt enough. This wasn't just a case of two bad employees, it was a test of everything his company claimed to stand for. And he had failed that test until now, but no more. Today, justice wouldn't just be served, it would be engineered. He spent the morning quietly laying bricks beneath the surface. A phone call to a local outreach center connected him to Jessica Miller, a single mother raising a daughter while working 2 jobs. She wasn't an actor, didn't need a script. Her life had already written the role. All Lucas needed to do was ask. In exchange for her participation and a small donation to her daughter's education fund, Jessica agreed to become part of something bigger, a moment that could change not only Oliver's life, but the soul of Carter's diner. Jessica arrived with her daughter Lily just after 10, right on schedule. They were dressed simply, clean but clearly worn clothes, the kind people judge without knowing the story behind them. Lucas watched from his usual booth, cap pulled low, eyes alert. Oliver was already working, no surprise there. The man probably beat the sunrise to his station. He moved a little slower than yesterday, but with the same focus, the same quiet grace. Emma approached Jessica's booth, her customer service smile painted on. Welcome to Carter's. What can I get you today? Jessica smiled softly. Just a grilled cheese for my daughter, and a cup of soup for me, please. Lucas watched the interaction with a tension that coiled tight in his gut. This had to play out naturally, no interference, no cues, just truth revealing itself. 20 minutes later, Jessica approached the register. She opened her wallet, hesitated, then looked up, eyes wide with what looked like real distress. I'm so sorry, she said, voice low, shaking. I thought I had enough. My card was declined yesterday. Bank issue. I'm $15 short. Emma's smile vanished. Instantly. We can't just give away food, ma'am. Maybe count your money before ordering next time. Lily looked up, confused. Mommy, she whispered. Jessica's eyes welled with tears. Could I maybe wash dishes to make up the difference? I really don't have anywhere else to go. From his position at the dish station, Oliver heard every word. Lucas saw the shift in him, the way his shoulders squared. He dried his hands, stepped forward, and quietly approached the register. I've got it, Oliver said, voice steady. Jessica shook her head, playing her part perfectly. That's really not necessary. We all need help sometimes, Oliver replied, reaching into his pocket. You can pay it forward when things get better. He handed Emma the money. Lucas turned his attention to Charlotte, who was watching from the second register. Her lips curled into a satisfied smirk. Lucas knew what that meant. The trap was working. They thought it was their plan being executed. They had no idea they were walking into his. Less than 10 minutes later, Charlotte leaned in toward William, who was reviewing receipts behind the counter. Hey, boss, she called just loud enough to be heard. We might want to check Register 1 again. I think we're short. Another $20, just like earlier this week. William frowned, clearly worn thin by the repeated financial inconsistencies. That's impossible. I balanced it less than an hour ago. Emma chimed in, her voice laced with concern. Actually, I noticed something strange earlier. That woman who couldn't pay? Oliver came over right after. I saw him near the drawer while I was helping someone else. Lucas watched the pieces fall into place. He saw William glance toward the dish pit, uncertainty in his eyes. He didn't want to believe it, but the logic was laid out like bait. Over the past week, register discrepancies had become a pattern. And Oliver, helpful, humble Oliver, had been near the register each time. I'm not saying he is stealing, Charlotte added, tone theatrical. But I think it's worth checking. I mean, desperate people do desperate things, right? Lucas's blood burned, but he held still. This wasn't the moment to reveal himself. Not yet. I need to know what's going on, William said grimly. The owner's been asking questions. Maybe we should do a surprise count. Right now. Great idea, Emma said quickly. Before anyone has a chance to adjust anything. Lucas sat back and watched as William counted the register under their watchful eyes. When he announced the shortage, exactly $20, Emma and Charlotte exchanged a triumphant glance. Right on script. What they didn't know was that the entire scene had been captured, because Lucas had done more than arrange a test. He had installed hidden cameras. After hearing Ron's story, after seeing Oliver disappear into a trailer barely, held together by rust and hope, Lucas made a decision. He hadn't just called Jessica, he had called a private security vendor. 2 cameras were placed inside the diner that very morning. One above the main register, another just behind the service counter, both with audio, both completely silent. They hadn't even noticed. The footage now held everything. Emma mocking Jessica. Oliver stepping in with quiet dignity. Emma and Charlotte watching, plotting, smirking. The setup, the accusation, all of it. Lucas stood, dropping a few dollars for his untouched coffee, then walked out the door without a word. But he didn't leave. He crossed the street, slid into his car, and opened his laptop. With a few keystrokes, he accessed the live feed, saved the footage, and began preparing the final phase. By the time he returned to the diner later that afternoon, he wasn't just the man in the flannel shirt anymore. He was the reckoning. Tomorrow, the truth would be played out for all to see, and justice, long overdue, would finally take the floor. The diner was humming with its usual morning rhythm when Lucas arrived. 3rd day in disguise, same flannel shirt, same ball cap, same worn expression, except this time, everything was different. Because this morning Lucas Carter wasn't here to observe. He was here to act. The plan was in place. The footage had been reviewed, compiled, and backed up to multiple drives. The pieces had aligned perfectly. Now all that was left was execution. Oliver was already hard at work as usual, greeting staff with nods and moving through the kitchen like a man who belonged to the place more than its walls did. He didn't notice anything unusual. Not yet. Emma and Charlotte walked in together, whispering and smirking like conspirators playing their final move. Charlotte wore an extra layer of smug confidence. Emma clutched her clipboard like a badge of self-righteousness. William, pacing between the office and the kitchen, looked even more tired than the day before. The missing money was now undeniable, and for the moment their plan was working until it wasn't. At exactly 10:15 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. Jessica Miller entered with Lily in tow, the same way she had the day before. She smiled shyly at the waitstaff, took the same Booth ordered the same modest meal. The moment played out like a rerun. Her wallet came up light, her apology trembled. Oliver stepped in, again, offering quiet compassion and a few folded bills. Charlotte and Emma stood by the register, watching like hawks circling prey. Everything was unfolding just as it had yesterday. And that's when Lucas stood up, no longer slouching, no longer hiding. He removed the ball cap slowly, letting the silence ripple across the room like a dropped glass in a church. The air shifted. The din of conversation stilled. Chairs paused. Mid-scoot. Even the cooks fell quiet behind the heat lamps. William's eyes widened. "Mr. Carter, I had no idea you were here." Lucas's voice cut through the silence, calm but laced with steel. "This isn't an inspection, William." He walked toward the center of the diner, each step deliberate, his presence now undeniable. "I've been here every day this week, not as the owner, as a customer, as an observer, as a witness." He stopped at the center of the floor, turned toward the staff, then toward the customers. Every eye was on him now, and what I've seen, Lucas exhaled, has shaken me. He turned toward the TV mounted in the corner of the diner. With a few quick moves, He pulled a small remote from his jacket and pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. The footage was crystal clear. Sound amplified. The entire diner watched, jaws slack, as the truth unfolded in high-definition clarity. There was Emma voiding legitimate transactions. There was Charlotte pocketing overcharged bills. Then came their whispering scheme. If we frame Oliver for stealing... Every syllable perfectly captured. Gasps erupted. Forks clattered onto plates. A woman at the counter stood abruptly. "That's disgusting," she whispered, voice trembling with fury. But Lucas wasn't finished. He advanced the footage. Now! It showed Oliver, quietly slipping money into the register after helping customers in need. Oliver, mopping up messes with no complaint. Oliver, shielding waitstaff from customer complaints. Oliver, covering the mistakes of others, and never once asking for praise. When Lucas paused the video, the screen froze on a still image. Charlotte smirking while Emma counted out a falsified shortfall in the drawer. Lucas turned slowly. "Theft," he said, his voice now filled with weight, "has occurred in this diner, but not by the man they accused. The only theft happening here was committed by the very people who orchestrated this scheme." Charlotte took a shaky step, backward. Emma turned pale, mascara already streaking down her cheeks. "Mr. Carter," Charlotte started, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's been a misunderstanding." Lucas raised a hand. "A misunderstanding is giving someone the wrong order. Framing an innocent man for your own theft is not a misunderstanding. It's a crime." He turned to William. "Did you know Oliver lives in a broken trailer behind this diner because he's still paying off his wife's medical bills? Did you know he skips meals just to help strangers cover theirs? Did you know the man you were about to fire has been keeping this place alive from the shadows while others poisoned it from the front counter?" William looked devastated. "No, sir. I had no idea." Emma collapsed into sobs, shaking her head. "We didn't mean to..." Lucas cut her off sharply. "The only thing you didn't mean was to get caught." He turned toward the door. Right on cue, 2 uniformed officers stepped in. Lucas had already shown them the footage earlier that morning. Charges had been prepared. The moment was coordinated. "You..." "Can't do this!" Charlotte shouted, her voice now shrill, panicked. "We have rights!" "Yes, you do," Lucas said, voice cold as ice. "And you're about to hear them read aloud." As the officers approached, Charlotte tried to bolt. But 2 regulars from the counter stepped forward instinctively, blocking her path. Emma stood frozen in place, tears pouring freely now. Within minutes, both women were escorted out of the diner to stunned silence and the low murmur of disbelief from watching customers. Lucas turned back to face his staff, but his eyes found only one man. Oliver stood at his station, hands still red from hot water, shoulders stiff, expression unreadable. Lucas stepped forward, voice softening. "Oliver, I owe you an apology. Not just for this, but for every day you carried this place without recognition. For every moment you were unseen. That ends today." He beat past. Then, like the sun breaking through after a storm, the diner erupted in applause. Customers rose from their seats. Staff clapped with red faces and misted eyes. The dishwasher was no longer invisible. Lucas raised a hand to quiet. "The room. There will be changes. Effective immediately," he said. "Carter's Diner is implementing a full policy review across all locations. We will ensure every employee is protected, valued, heard. There will be new leadership training, a living wage for all employees, and an emergency fund for staff facing personal crises. We will no longer be a company that claims to be a family. We'll prove it." The room held still, processing. Then one voice rang out from the back booth. "About damn time." Laughter broke through the tension. Even Oliver cracked a small, exhausted smile. Lucas looked out at his people, his real people, and saw what had been buried beneath years of complacency. This wasn't just a business. It was a family. One that needed healing. And this was just the beginning. The morning after the confrontation, Carter's Diner didn't just open for business, it opened with purpose. Word had spread like wildfire. The town was still buzzing. Everyone knew now, about Oliver, about the frame job, about the owner who had walked among them without saying a word until the exact moment it mattered most. By 7:30 a.m., the diner was packed. Every stool at the counter taken, every booth filled. Customers waited outside on the sidewalk, sipping coffee from to-go. Cups as if this were the hottest restaurant in the city. But they weren't here for the food. They were here for him. Oliver stepped through the back door of the diner, precisely on time, same as always. His apron was folded under one arm, his face marked with exhaustion that had become permanent over the years. What he wasn't prepared for was the wave of applause that greeted him the moment he stepped inside. A standing ovation. It started with the kitchen staff, then the waitresses, then every customer in the room rose to their feet. People clapped, some with tears in their eyes, others with grateful smiles. It was the kind of moment reserved for heroes, not dishwashers. And yet no one clapped louder than Lucas Carter himself. Dressed in a plain button-down, no longer hiding, Lucas stood near the counter and extended a hand toward Oliver. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" The room fell silent as Oliver followed him to the back office. The door clicked shut behind them. Inside, the air was still. Lucas gestured toward a chair. Oliver hesitated before sitting. His hands rested on his knees, fingers worn from years of labor, voice tentative. "I want you to know, I've always been grateful for this job. It came at a time when no one else would take a chance on me." Lucas didn't waste a second. He slid a folder across the desk. Oliver opened it. His eyes widened. Inside was an offer letter, a promotion, floor manager, full-time salary, full benefits, paid time off, medical coverage. "I don't understand," Oliver whispered. "I'm not management material. I never even—" "You have something far more valuable than a resume," Lucas interrupted gently. "You have integrity, compassion. You understand people. You've been running this diner's soul without a title. Now it's time the title catches up to the man." Before Oliver could respond, Lucas placed a second folder in front of him. "There's something else." Oliver looked up, confused. "What's this?" Lucas hesitated, then spoke slowly, deliberately. "Last night, I called your daughter, Sarah. She knows everything now, the trailer, the debt, the long hours. She cried, Oliver. She had no idea you'd been carrying all of this alone." Oliver swallowed hard, lips trembling. "I didn't want to burden her. She's got her own life." "She said something I'll never forget," Lucas said. "She said, 'Love isn't a burden, it's a privilege.'" Inside the second folder was a deed. A small house, 3 blocks from the diner. Move-in ready, no rent, no mortgage. His name on the front page in bold print. Oliver stared at it, as if it were a dream he wasn't allowed to have. "I can't accept this," he whispered. "You will," Lucas said firmly. "Consider it 7 years of overdue bonuses, and there's more." Lucas placed one last envelope on the desk. "Your wife's medical debts, paid in full. Starting today, the only bills you'll carry are the ones you choose to pay forward." The floodgates broke. Years of quiet suffering cracked into pieces. Oliver leaned forward, head in his hands, tears slipping down his face unchecked. Lucas stood, walked around the desk, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you reminded me of why I started this business in the first place. Thank you for living the values I forgot." When the 2 men returned to the dining floor, Oliver no longer walked like a man trying to disappear. He stood taller, not because he had changed, but because the world finally saw who he really was. Lucas turned to the crowd and raised his voice above the chatter. "There's one more thing," he announced. "Starting today, Carter's Diner is implementing a new policy across all locations. Every employee will receive a living wage, comprehensive benefits, and emergency financial assistance. No one who works for this company will ever have to choose between helping others and helping themselves." The room exploded with applause. Lucas waited for it to quiet before continuing. "And for those asking how you can help, today we're launching the Oliver Community Fund. A portion of every meal sold will go towards supporting staff and local families facing financial hardships. This place isn't just a diner anymore. It's a safety net, a second chance, a community. Oliver stood beside him, stunned. Amy, the single mom he'd helped more than once, stepped forward from a nearby booth. Her kids stood beside her, holding a small envelope. "We started a collection for you," she said, voice shaking. "It's not much, but—" Lucas raised a hand. "Every penny of Oliver's expenses is covered, but I have a better idea. Let's put that money into the fund, in his name, to help the next person in need." Amy nodded, eyes glassy. Oliver reached out, took the envelope, and handed it back with a grateful smile. In the weeks that followed, the transformation rippled outward. Carter's Diner didn't just become a better place to work, it became a symbol. Other locations adopted the same policies. Employees who once felt voiceless were now seen, heard, empowered. Customers came not just for meals, but for meaning. And Oliver, who once lived in the shadows, was now the heartbeat of it all. He moved into the house quietly. No fanfare. Just boxes filled with old memories and new hope. The kitchen was small. The bed didn't creak. The lights didn't flicker. And for the first time in years, he didn't sleep in his car. He slept in a home. And he didn't leave the diner. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because Carter's Diner wasn't just a job anymore. It was family. It was purpose. It was peace. In the days that followed, Lucas returned to his office. Not as a CEO burdened by spreadsheets, but as a man changed by one dishwasher and a week of uncomfortable truths. He sat at his desk, looking out the window, not at the city skyline, but inward, into himself. For years, he had expanded Carter's Diner with numbers in mind, growth charts, investor calls, new locations. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped looking people in the eye, stopped listening, stopped asking the simplest question, "How are they doing?" But Oliver never stopped asking. He did it quietly, without praise, without a title. While Lucas read reports, Oliver scrubbed dishes and covered shortfalls, and changed lives one act of unseen kindness at a time. No spotlight, no recognition. Just dignity, compassion, purpose. That's what Lucas had learned. The quiet ones often carry the weight of the world. The people who mop floors, refill water glasses, and hold broken systems together with nothing but their own sense of right and wrong. People like Oliver didn't ask for awards, but they deserved the world. Lucas looked down at the file he had created, marked simply Project Phoenix. A new initiative, one that would take him on the road, not as a CEO behind tinted windows, but as a man willing to walk the floors of his diners again, one by one, disguised, listening, learning. Because if one Carter's Diner could rot behind smiling reviews, what else had he missed? He thought of Charlotte and Emma, now gone from the company. Their names were already becoming cautionary tales. But the story he wanted to tell was Oliver's. The man who slept in a car yet gave like he had a kingdom. The man whose hands were cracked from work but never once clenched in bitterness. He stood from his desk, pulled on his flannel shirt, the same one he wore that first undercover day, and felt something stir deep in his chest. A calling, not to save anyone, but to remember what leadership really meant. As he prepared to leave, a quote came to him. Something Oliver had once said, almost under his breath, while wiping down a counter. "You can't always fix the world, but you can make your square inch of it a little kinder." Lucas smiled. He would make every square inch count now, because Carter's Diner wasn't the only place hiding a truth. Would you risk your job to protect a man like Oliver? Comment below. Follow for the next chapter in Lucas's undercover journey. Season 2 begins soon.